Welcome to WMB Business. I'm Steve Dorfman. How do you define success? That's an age-old question that today's guest has a unique answer for, and that's because he had a unique life event happen to him that most of us will never experience, fortunately. But that helped him define success, and that's what we're here to talk about today. And today's guest is Pete Smith, president of SmithImpact. Pete, welcome to the show.
No, thanks for having me.
So I went online and I looked at synonyms for the word success. Right, here's what I found. Accomplishment, achievement, advance, benefit, fame, gain, happiness, profit, progress, prosperity, realization, triumph, victory, and win.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, in our conversation leading up to today's show, none of those are what you would use to define success. Talk about how you define success.
Not that those aren't important, right? Because you brought up some great words, and you want to feel happy and achievement and everything else. But at this point, I look at success more in terms of alignment. Am I doing the things that are based on what I stand for? Are they in alignment with who I am? And are they benefiting others? And if I'm doing those three things, if what I'm doing is in alignment with who I am, if it allows me to take a stand and really live out what I'm passionate about, and if it's for the benefit of other people, that's success.
Okay, so what would be an example of that?
Well, look at how often people look at success in terms of what their job is, right? For me, I look at really identifying, becoming clear on my makeup, right? Looking at who I am, looking at who I'm not, right? And really getting to the core of what makes me tick, and then what my stand is. So, for example, my stand is impact, right? That's what I believe in. That's what I'm passionate about. Significant impact is what I go for.
When you say your stand, that's what you stand for?
Absolutely. Yep. That's my position. That's what I'm passionate about. That's what drives me, right? And that stand is then in alignment with who I am at my core. I'm open, I'm honest, I am genuine, I'm authentic. And if I am able to align those two things, if I'm able to take a stand for being someone of impact while being someone who is authentic and genuine, and if what I'm doing benefits others in the end, that's what success is.
So then does success have more to do with self or others? Or is there a balance?
I think there's a balance. I think you have to have both, right? It's the idea that it starts with you, but it's not about you, right? And I think that's a big key. So when you ask if it's more self or others, I don't know if you can have one without the other.
This isn't always the way you defined success. You had something really profound happen.
Yeah.
And so I'd love for you to share that story.
Yeah. When I was 35, I had a stroke. And it was out of the blue. I certainly didn't have any of the symptoms of someone that would have a stroke, and I wasn't the age of most people that you would think had a stroke. And it happened one morning. At the time, I was an operations executive and successful, right, in terms of how many people view success. And
which is what, by the way?
What kind of money am I making? What job am I doing? How many people do I have reporting to me? Am I first or am I the second loser? Right, all those things where we think if you're not the best, you're nothing type thing. And so from a surface level perspective, yeah, you would say I was living a very successful life. I had a very good job, I had a very good income, I had a number of people reporting to me, so everything was going fine. And then in May of 2010, the stroke hit me. And it was just a fascinating, terrifying experience, but it really changed my entire perspective. Yeah. There was a moment during that stroke where I heard my body shutting down. And it's a very surreal moment, you know. It sounds like an internal engine winding down. And that's what I heard. And I remember sitting there because I'd fallen to the ground. And I remember thinking, I have about 60 seconds left to live. That's it, right? And I've read blogs, and certainly since then, but you read these articles where people are saying, just embrace death, right? And I don't know who those people are that write that. I got to tell you, I was terrified of it. I was panicking inside.
At any age, let alone 35.
Yeah. And so now I'm thinking, this is it. Like, this is the first time and the only time I really thought, I'm dying, right? It's happening right here, right now. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, Whitney, my wife, is going to come downstairs. She's going to turn the corner. She's going to see me dead on my dining room floor. Like, what's the impact that this is going to have on her? Right? And I thought about my parents. I thought about my siblings, and I thought about how are they going to handle the news. And And which one of them is going to be responsible for calling my parents to tell them this news, and what's the impact of that person? So it
All
became
this
very
rushing through your
rapid,
head.
rapid, quick thoughts. And then I remember thinking about my own life. I remember thinking, did you really live? Like, did you really live? You know, did you do everything? Did you embrace everything you wanted to? Did you hold back at all? Can you honestly say that you lived life? And that was very awakening to me. You know, that's very real at that moment. What's interesting about that experience is that at no time, here I have floods of thoughts coming through my mind, and never once did I think about success in the superficial way. I never thought about the money I was making. I never thought about the number of people I had working for me. Never thought about the car that I drove. I sure as heck never thought about my 401k. You know, it's as if none of those things were important. What I did think about and what did cross my mind was whether or not it was significant. And I thought that's meaningful, because here I am, one of the, you know, in that moment, one of the things that mattered to me most was whether or not I mattered at all. And from that experience, things kind of shifted for me moving forward.
So you now measure success as significance?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's how you define it?
Yeah. You know, we both know a number of successful people who, when you talk to them, they're not fulfilled. You know, you can have a position, you can have a job and be very good at it, and not be happy at all, not be fulfilled at all, not feel like you're making a difference. And I think that's what you're going to think about at the end, right? You're going to turn around and you're really going to wonder, you were successful, which was great, but were you fulfilled? Were you successful? Were you significant? Did you do anything that mattered? And not necessarily, again, just for your life, but in the lives of other people.
And now you parlay this into the business world.
Yeah.
And in the context of leadership and employee engagement. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So about a year after the stroke, you know, I really did this deep dive after, because obviously the story has a happy ending. You know, I didn't die, and I regained I had lost my speech, and I was temporarily paralyzed on the right side of my body.
How long did all this go on, by the way? How long was
it all
recovery?
came back in a day.
In a day?
In a day.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
What a
And it's
blessing.
so much so where I've had, you know, doctors have looked at me and they've looked at the scans and back at me, and they're saying, like, you know, the body doesn't do what yours did.
Wow.
in as quick a time that it did.
Yeah.
So by all means, they're very much a blessing, you know. And so since then, I've done this deep dive in looking at, well, what moves people forward, what keeps people held back, how do you know you're really living, you know, and that has been a fascinating journey to go on and recognize what holds us back, what allows us to move forward, and that is what then has kind of parlayed into me leaving my position. And I had a great job. It wasn't that I was unhappy. I left to pursue something different and to work with people in a different way, and to work with leaders and work with young professionals in a way to help them kind of see the same things that I have learned without having a stroke to do it.
So in looking at defining success as significance, is that to say that it's more about a destination or more about the journey?
I think it's the journey. I think it's a journey. You know, to some degree, it's almost like humility, right? Humility is something to always be pursued. You never really quite get it, because what happens when you get it? And then you turn around and be like, well, I'm humble, and then you're not anymore, right? And so it's kind of the same idea that significance, we're always striving. And here's the great thing about it. When you have that as the goal and you recognize that it's the journey, then it doesn't matter whether you're talking about it in your personal life or your professional life. And so many people try to separate those two without really recognizing they're so integrated. And so for my
No way
stand,
around that, right?
yeah, of being someone of impact and significance, I mean, that's true for how I want to be a husband. It's true for how I want to be a dad. It's true for how I want to run my business and how I want to treat my clients, and because that's my stand. And so there is no more, well, this is me in my professional life, and this is me in my personal life. This is me, and this is how I'm going to be in all aspects of my life.
You know, it seems that today we're hearing so much more, maybe in the last decade or so, I've noticed anyway, that we're hearing so much more about leadership and emerging leaders. Why do you think that in the business world, why do you think that's the case, that there's this recent attention to leadership?
I think, well, you have a number of factors. Some people will cite the age of the workforce, and they'll just recognize how much of the workforce is now the millennial population, how that's going to increase. And so they're saying there's a gap because most of today's leaders are baby boomers or traditionalist roles, and then all of a sudden those things are going to get passed to the millennials. So they're recognizing that there may be a gap there. But I do also think that the role of a leader is tremendously influential in the lives of the people that they lead, and not just from a professional setting, but from a personal setting as well. You know, we've heard time and time again that one of the most important relationships that takes place within a business is the relationship between the employee and the immediate manager. You know, and let's work on that relationship, because that's the one that's going to influence that person and affect them in their personal lives and their professional lives. So I think it's coming more to light because people recognize the impact that it can have. How many people do it poorly, unfortunately, for things that have been modeled for them, haven't been great, and I think that catches up to us.
When viewers go to visit your website, they're going to read about management, they're going to read about leadership, and I've asked this of previous guests of the show because I think it's important to make the distinction. Help us make that distinction between management and leadership, managing and leading people.
Yeah. Believe it or not, I think that when a lot of people try to separate those two almost negatively, as if being a leader is great and manager is not. And I don't necessarily buy that. I think you can have great managers who other people want to be around and want to be. Well, you're leading then, right? I think maybe the roles are what can be different. If you're strictly looking at things from an operations perspective, scheduling and making sure things are in alignment from an operations perspective, that's more of a management role. But if you're talking about leading, if you're talking about moving people, influencing them, bettering themselves, modeling the way, I think that's where you start really looking at what leadership is all about. So I try not to make too much of a distinction between you're a leader and you're a manager, because I think you can be great in both. I look at it more, what are the tasks that you're involved in? Are you merely just setting the schedule for the week? Well, that's more of a management role. Or are you doing it in a way that inspires people, that moves people, that motivates people? Well, then you're leading. And so I think you can be a leader in both senses.
Is one more significant than the other?
I think you can do both well to the point where you influence someone's life and make them better than no.
Excellent. You say, and I've checked out a few of your blog posts, and you say that the four-letter F word, fear, tells us stories that aren't true.
Talk
about that a little bit.
It is fascinating when you really dive into what moves people forward and what keeps them held back. And one of the things that I've realized is that every one of us walks around with fears, self-doubts, and insecurities. It does not matter what role you're in. It doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter if you're the CEO or if you're in an entry-level position. We all have this internal dialogue that we've had from early on that is always saying, are you sure you want to do that? You don't want to do that, right? You're not going to be successful doing that. What will people say? You're going to be an imposter. You're going to be viewed as an imposter. You're going to be wrong, right? And all of these self-doubts and fears, which every one of us has. And that's what I've learned, is that there are times when we are truly doing things that resonate with who we are at our best. And then there are times that we do things based on our fears, our self-doubts, and insecurities. And the question is, which one will you listen to more, right? And the crazy part about this is that you can listen to those fears, self-doubts, and insecurities and still be successful. But you'll be minimized. So I'll give you an example. Why don't people ask questions during meetings?
Oh, they're maybe afraid it's a dumb question?
Right? They're like, exactly. They think, well, should I know the answer to this question before I answer? What is everyone going to else think, right? And we have this whole internal dialogue take place. And so what our fears do, what they tell us is, well, then don't ask the question, right? So it's protective in nature, so we don't ask a question. You said, well, no harm, no foul. Yeah, but you didn't get the answer either, right? So you haven't really progressed. So you minimized. So that's what our fears do. It's not that we design these to harm us. We design them and we listen to them to protect us, but they're very minimizing as well.
Very good.
Yeah.
All right, we've got to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to ask Pete about his role in the young professionals community. And you're watching We Mean Business. We'll be back in seconds.
Hart, what's going on?
I'm leaving.
Why? What did I do?
Not enough. You constantly ignore me. You barely eat anything healthy. You're half as active as you used to be. The pressure is just too much. I quit.
Okay, I get it. I'll do better. Just please, don't leave.
Okay. But remember, if I go, you go.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you. Uncontrolled high blood pressure could lead to stroke, heart attack, or death. Get yours to a healthy range before it's too late.
Welcome back to We Mean Business. Today's guest is Pete Smith, president of SmithImpact, and we're talking about how success is defined as significance. Pete, you focus mainly on young professionals. Why have you chosen that group?
What a great age group to really make an influence, right? You know, think about when you're a young professional, you're coming out, and young professional for me is 25 to 35, somewhere in that range. Mm-hmm. We've all heard of this term, quarter-life crisis, right? And
well, John Mayer, I think, coined the phrase in one of his songs.
Did he?
Yeah.
Did he? Okay. Which was great because I can look back and think, I think I went through that, without knowing that was the term in it. But it's really this idea that you've had some success, you're working in the workplace for a couple of years, and all of a sudden you're wondering, is this what I want to do? Like, is this really all there is? And so I find that young professionals, they find themselves in two categories. Some of them are still struggling to just get ahead. They're not that paycheck to paycheck idea, and they'll take a step forward and it seems like two steps back, and they're really struggling. Others have found success, and they're turning around saying, this can't be all that there is. Like, I don't know what I want to do. Am I doing anything meaningful, right? And so that age group is really struggling with uncertainty and failure, right? They're so worried about those two things. But then you look at older, and you think, well, people have midlife crisis. What's that all about? Well, that's, I think, where we're starting to look at fulfillment and meaning, right? And so what I tried to do now is look at, well, how do we bring fulfillment and meaning into that age group that is so worried about uncertainty and failure? And if I can influence the way that they think and the way that their perspective and the way that they approach things at that age, how different would their lives be moving forward by the time that they're 40, 50, having their midlife crisis?
Yeah, so. I've heard and read that the average tenure for that age group is 18 months, that there's a lot of job hopping. What do you attribute that to?
Opportunities.
Yeah.
So,
meaning they're always looking for the next best opportunity?
Yeah, possibly looking for the next best opportunity, and there are opportunities available to them, right? And we look at years ago, maybe the opportunities weren't there, or the mindset was different also. You get a job and you stay there for 25, 30 years, and you retire with that company, and maybe you get a pension from them and move on. But really, what's certain about that path today? We see companies that have been around forever, all of a sudden, for naught, right? We see pension plans and people's savings all of a sudden washed away. So is that really a secure route anymore? And I don't know if people, younger people, are buying into that. And I don't think that's necessarily a terrible thing. The opportunities that are available to them are greater than they've ever been. And so I think that they are maximizing the opportunities. I will say, though, that I'm wondering if many of them job hop with this idea that they're still trying to find meaning and significance in their lives, and it doesn't matter how many jobs that they go to. It all depends on where their perspective is and how they're defining that. So I think it's a little bit of a trade-off. I think the opportunities are there, and I think they're able to take advantage of them. But my concern is that they're leaping with the idea that the next job is the one that's going to be the most meaningful for them, and it's not. So.
Yeah, that's a great perspective on it, and maybe even a way to talk about what's really going on in a way that helps them understand themselves better than they might currently. In other words, that might describe what's going on a deeper level than the way they might actually see what's going on. They might not actually see what you just described.
Many of them don't.
Yeah.
Here again, what are they being driven by? I don't want to fail, right? I just spent thousands and thousands of dollars on education, which people told me is going to be the ticket to everything that I want, right? And now all of a sudden they're paying their bills, they have these student loans, and they're trying to figure it out. And so they're looking at different companies that provide X for their staff, and they get there and they think, oh, this is the greatest thing ever, and then that wears off. And so now we're looking at the next thing, and they keep jumping on that way. So
for folks that are leading these young professionals, how can they better work toward employee engagement? We hear so much about employee engagement. So what's the key there?
One of the first things that I tell them to stop doing, stop reading surveys. And here's why. There are survey after survey after survey which talk about what today's employees want. And that actually can expand the rift between, or expand the gap between management and employees. And the reason is managers look at those surveys and they say, oh, 70% enjoy work-life balance. So let's figure out how to incorporate more of a work-life balance in our place of work, and telecommuting will come in, everything else. But it's just a survey. So motivation is so unique to the individual. And it's almost that because they've read the survey, they don't necessarily then need to go out and actually talk to their employees as individuals and say, what motivates you, right? Because for the individual who loves the idea of coming to work every day, loves seeing their friends, and wants that camaraderie, they don't really care about telecommuting. As a matter of fact, they don't want to be home, right? Others do. And so all they do is read these surveys. They say, well, this is what they want. Clearly, this is what, and then they recognize that their changes benefit some, and they lose others. And they can't figure it out, and they get more frustrated. And so they'll create elaborate incentive programs because that's apparently what works, right? And here again, some people will thrive on that, and they're in this constant state of losing others because they haven't taken the time to figure out what motivates each individual, because it's a very unique experience.
Yeah. Is it something, can you just go and ask a young professional what motivates you? Are you going to get a straight answer or an intuitive answer? I mean, do they know? It's
going to depend on the relationship you have with them, right? If you're someone who has never talked to them before, and all of a sudden you come up to them like, really, what motivates you? They're going to be like, why are you asking, right? Do you not think I'm motivated?
Is there a possible raise?
Yeah, exactly. So all of a sudden, what happens? Fear, self-doubt, and insecurity come rapid fire. You're going to lose your job. Why are they asking? What's their agenda, right? And all these other things. But assuming that we've had a great relationship with them, why wouldn't that be a great question? How often have we ever in our lives had our manager sit down and say, you know what, I'm really interested in figuring out how to tap into what motivates you more on a daily basis. Can you share that with me? Now, first they may fall down out of surprisement, right? Because no one's ever asked them that. But why not? Why aren't we having those conversations? Some people like the idea of being appreciated for their work done. Some people are going to be money motivated. Some people want recognition. Well, let's find out what our employees want, and let's figure out how to tap into each one of them in a meaningful way.
I can see how something called employee NPS might fit into this conversation, where you could ask an employee on a scale from 0 to 10, how likely is it you'd recommend us as an employer to a friend or a relative?
Yeah.
And let's say they say 8. Whatever the number is, you then follow it up with, what's their primary reason? You just said 8 or 6 or 3 or 10 or whatever the number is. What's their primary reason, right? And so you might uncover what the good or the bad. You might uncover what motivates that particular individual.
That would be excellent.
But in a roundabout way that maybe just uncovers something that wouldn't have gotten uncovered otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think that young professionals have more challenges than previous generations, or is it just a different set of challenges?
I think it's a different set of challenges. I don't know if I would have thrived growing up with Facebook when I was growing up. I think I probably would have been arrested 7 times over, because everyone in my college dorm had a street sign somewhere, and I think if we had pictures being taken of that, there
street signs hanging on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. Like Smith Street hanging on the wall, and so little things like that. And so I thank God I didn't have Facebook growing up at that point. But there's so much more exposure, and that I think is a challenge that we haven't had to deal with earlier generations. Everything is out there. Some, yes, they're young and naive, and they put it out for themselves. Others, they're tagged in pictures, and friends are putting things out there. So I think that's a challenge that we didn't have to deal with. I think the idea of getting a degree and getting a job almost guaranteed, well, it's not anymore, or certainly a high-paying job where you're going to be able to pay back your student loans. I don't know if that's the case. But I think some of the other challenges we dealt with, how to manage your finances. That's been a challenge for generation after generation. Some do it very well, others struggle with that. So there are certain challenges that I think we've all dealt with at some point. I do think that regardless of our age, we are going to get to the point where we look at, am I doing meaningful work, right? And that I don't think is going to be any different for this generation. It won't be any different for the next generation and the generation after that. I think we're called to that. We long for that. We long to know that we're making a difference.
Do you think that people know that? Or is it just one of these things that we sort of look back maybe after a decade and say, yeah, that was the thing that was driving me, was what and that's the thing that had me job hopping, was that I wasn't finding that my work was meaningful, or that I was making a difference or a contribution, or that I was significant?
I think if you ask many young professionals, and not even young professionals, if you ask many people living today, how much would you spend for an hour of instant just clarity, right? Just an hour of clarity. How much would you spend for that? I know a lot of people that would spend a fortune just to get clear on who they are and what they want, right? Mark Twain said, I can help anybody achieve what they want out of this life. Problem is I can't find anyone who can tell me what they want, right? And it was true then, and it's true today, right?
Yeah.
And when you ask people, hey, what do you want? I mean, that sounds like such a simple question, but they really struggle with it. I don't really know, right?
Yeah.
So how do we get clear? How do we get clear? Simon Sinek talks about start with why. Well, I'll tell you what, your why becomes a lot more apparent if you start with who. Who you are will drive your why. Oh, that's why I do this thing. It's because I'm this. It's because I'm this. It's because I'm this. So clarity is just is a huge key for looking at what we are and who we are and
That's
what
really
we want.
good. And I would imagine that's something that afflicts all generations. You mentioned, so let's talk about leadership struggles a little bit,
Yeah.
specific to young professionals. You had said earlier, just a moment ago, that that leaders of young professionals might struggle with what motivates those young professionals. What's another top challenge that leaders might have when working with young professionals?
It starts with them. Some of the biggest challenges that I found within leaders today is not recognizing how their own fears, their own self-doubts, their own insecurities influence the way they lead others, right? Micromanagement, for example. You hear about micromanagement, and what is the solution that a lot of people have for micromanagement? Delegation, right? So we go in there, we teach this person how to delegate so they're not micromanaging as much. Micromanagement and delegation are two separate entities, and one does not solve the other, right? If you're going to talk about micromanagement, then we need to go back and say, well, where's the lack of trust come from? Where was the consequence, or was there, of this person's manager when they did something wrong, right? And looking all those things. So I think what is a big downfall for a leader is not having the awareness about their own actions, their own behaviors, and the results that they're creating, and how much that stems from the way that they think, the way that they approach things, their perspective, their values, their judgments, their beliefs, all of those things. Once they figure that out, and once they figure out, hey, you're going to do things a little bit different than me, that's okay. You're a little bit different than I am, and that's okay, as long as we're still striving for that end result.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Do you think it's the job of the leader to get people to think? And if so, how can they do that?
God, I hope so. I certainly hope so. One of the biggest benefits for a leader is to have people on their team who think, and not just think, but think things through. Right? And that goes back to the idea of not just coming.
Think, but think things through.
Think things through. We can all think, right? Crazy people think, right? We don't like what they're thinking, though, right? But we want to be able to think things through, right? Think things beyond the right here now. If I do this, then this may happen. If here's the problem, here's the solution. Think things through. If you have a team of people and you foster that in them by not just being the one that provides them all the answers, but instead ask them, what would you do here, right? What would you do here? And really get them to take on that initiative and ownership. God, yeah, that's the way to build a fantastic team.
Fantastic. So I hate to do this to you, but in the next 30 seconds, I want you to answer this question.
All right.
And because you say that great management can inspire the soul, poor management can crush the spirit. Great management can inspire the soul, poor management can crush the spirit. 30 seconds or less.
30 seconds. You spend most of your time with people at work, and the relationship that's most important there is between the employee and the immediate supervisor. Things that you say, the words are powerful. You want to brighten someone's day, learn how to treat people, learn what to say, learn how to be around them, because that can work for or against you. And I've seen too many times where people have done it poorly, and it crushes people internally. And I've had other people do it where it inspires others to achieve great things.
Thanks for taking my challenge.
Yeah.
You did well. All right, you've been watching We Mean Business. I'm Steve Dorfman, and if you'd like to learn more about Pete Smith and SmithImpact, you can visit wemeanbiz.tv. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.